There is a room at the edge of dawn where the world has not yet chosen its shape. No windows, no doors. Only the soft hum of a loom that has been working since before the first sunrise remembered itself. They say the room exists outside of ours, sitting between the last breath of night and the first thought of day. They say if you listen closely, the hum becomes a heartbeat, and if you breathe with it, the air will answer. They say many things. Most are guesses. The truth is quieter than any story. In that room, time is woven. The weaver is not old, for age is a measure of counting, and nothing in that place can be counted. The weaver is not young either, for beginnings are only names we give to paths we are already on. The weaver simply is. Cloaked in twilight, fingers pale as first frost, eyes deep as the space between seconds, the weaver sits before the loom and draws thread from the dark. Each strand glows faintly, a color that does not exist in ordinary speech. When the weaver lifts a thread, it hums with a life of its own. Laughter low and bright, a cry, a promise, the quiet of a hand held in winter. There are threads rough with stubbornness and threads smooth with surrender. Threads braided from courage, threads that smell of rain and books and hearth smoke. Threads that remember oceans, mountains, deserts, and the names of wind. When the weaver passes a thread through the loom, a line of light crosses the silence. Old patterns flicker beneath, not erased but softened. A map of what the world has been, a suggestion of what it might become. The weaver does not choose among them like a judge, nor command them like a king. The weaver listens. The threads speak, and the weaver answers with patience. On this dawn, the hum shifts. Somewhere far below the room, a child is born, full of startled heat and the smell of iron. Somewhere else, a ship puts out from harbor, her ropes wet with night. Somewhere deeper still, in the chamber behind every beating heart, a choice sharpens like a blade. The loom hears all of it. The loom drinks the noise and returns it as music. Steady. The weaver murmurs, though no lips move. A hand guides a bright thread. Another steadies a dark one. Bright meets dark. A pattern rises like breath on glass. It resembles a road at first, then a river, then nothing the world has seen before. The weaver pauses. Between two threads there is a small empty space, as narrow as a sigh. It is there that possibility sleeps. Possibility is a delicate creature. It must be warmed by attention but never gripped. To stare at it too long is to frighten it away. To ignore it is to let it crumble like frost under noon. The weaver knows this dance. The weaver has always known. A bell sounds without sound. A visitor approaches the room, not by foot, not by wing, but by longing. Longing is a road the world keeps forgetting it has. It rises when someone waits too long at a window, or when the sea says a name back to the shore, or when the last light in a house refuses to go out. On such a road, a shape arrives. A woman with a scar shaped like a crescent, a traveler from the country of almost. She does not open the door because there is no door. She appears the way a memory appears, all at once with the clarity of water. Her hands are empty. Her eyes are not. "May I ask?" she says, though questions in that room are a kind of weather rather than words. The weaver inclines a head. Permission has always been the first thread. "I have reached the middle," says the traveler, "and the middle is a maze." The weaver lifts a length of thread. It is faint as first snow. What is it you believe you want? I want to choose, says the traveler, and not unmake everything that brought me here. The loom answers with a soft tremor, like a cat shifting in sleep. The weaver gestures toward the cloth of the world spread upon the beam. It glows softly, a field of woven dawns and buried midnights, of roads that went where they needed and roads that never learned their names. Look, the weaver says without speech, here is your thread. The traveler steps closer. She sees a thin, stubborn line moving through the pattern, doubling back when it meets a knot, fraying where it tried to be two things at once. She sees, too, a pale shining she cannot quite bear, moments when she held a cup of water like a sacrament, when she forgave someone who did not yet know how to be forgiven, when she spoke less and meant more. The thread is not smooth. It shivers with all she has loved and dropped and refused to let go. It is beautiful because it is true. The weaver lays another thread beside it, darker, thicker, heavy with the gravity of fear. This one belongs to you as well, the weaver notes. Shadow is not the enemy of light. It keeps the light honest. The traveler flinches. If both are mine, what is the choice? The weaver's fingers move. The bright and the dark cross, not fighting, but learning the feel of each other. In their meeting, a third color appears, not a mixture, but a harmony. It looks like the color of dawn before anyone has named it. The choice, says the weaver, is how you hold what you cannot change, and how you change what you cannot hold. Silence settles. The loom keeps breathing. The traveler's shoulders soften, as if a weight has remembered it can be set down. Will I cause harm? She asks. It is the smallest voice she has. Yes, says the weaver. Everyone does, but you may also mend. You will not mend by pretending you have never torn. You will mend by learning the stitch. The traveler watches the shuttle pass. Teach me. And so the lesson begins, not in words, but in patience. The weaver shows her how to wait for the right slack, how to follow the grain of events instead of slicing across them, how to see the knot not as a punishment but as a place to slow down. The traveler listens. Her hands learn the temperature of attention. When she breathes, the threads answer. Beyond the quiet room, a city grows brighter. Someone decides to write a letter they had sworn not to write. Someone else decides to sleep. A hawk opens a wing. A child learns the shape of their name. A road that has thought it was a river finds its courage and goes on walking. None of these know they have been held in gentleness. They do not need to know. Grace rarely introduces itself. The traveler weeps, and the loom does not mind. Tears are a clean kind of weakness. They wash the eyes where seeing has gone dull. When she has finished, she laughs, the shy laugh people keep for after storms. It sounds exactly like a loose thread catching the light. Will I remember this place? She asks at last. The weaver smiles the way candlelight smiles on the inside of a bowl. Not with your mouth, says the weaver, but your hands will remember. Your breath will. When you are about to choose, you will feel the room again. A hum behind your ribs. That is the loom. That is me. That is you. The traveler nods. She bows not low but true, and the bow becomes a door. When she straightens, she is already gone, walking back the road of longing that returns her to morning. Somewhere a kettle begins to talk. Somewhere a window learns how to open. Somewhere a scar remembers it is also a crescent moon. Alone once more, the weaver returns to the cloth. The pattern has shifted, not by force, but because attention has a gravity all its own. The bright and the dark continue their slow conversation. Between them, that narrow space where possibility sleeps grows a little warmer. The weaver lifts a final thread before the sun arrives. It is quiet. It is strong. It smells faintly of rain on dry earth. The weaver lays it down where the world is thinnest and sighs, not with fatigue, but with tenderness. Rest. The weaver whispers to the loom. We have held more than enough for one dawn. The hum eases. The room remains. Outside, the day finds its shape as if it had chosen it all by itself. In kitchens and fields and alleys and trains, people pick up the lives they were already in. Some feel a peace they cannot place. Some wake with a decision they had not rehearsed. Some feel only the simple relief of a breath that goes all the way down. All of them are threaded, and somewhere inside the silence they all share, a loom waits, and a weaver hums, and the space for possibility warms, the way a small light warms a threshold no one is afraid to cross. There are moments when even the weaver hesitates. The loom never stops, but its rhythm sometimes slows, a breath taken between breaths. It is in that quiet that the weaver listens to the echoes of what has been woven. Patterns within patterns. Songs hidden beneath silence. Every thread carries memory, and every memory asks to be remembered. The weaver looks upon the cloth of time, a great expanse that trembles with light. There are threads of joy, burning bright and clear, crossing the deep shadow of sorrow like constellations across the night. There are threads of grief woven beside laughter so closely they cannot be told apart. For what is one without the other? The weaver moves a hand across the weave, and the light shifts, entire centuries bending with the motion. A city rises from the dust, its spires glinting with pride, its streets filled with the hum of new promise. Within the city, a woman stands at a window, sketching the horizon with tired hands. Her name is unknown, but her dream is not. She believes she is small, and yet her smallest thought ripples through the loom, altering the color of an age. The weaver watches her, not to judge, but to witness. Every creation is a conversation between the infinite and the fragile. The woman's drawing will inspire a bridge, and the bridge will save a child, and that child will one day sing a song that keeps an entire people from despair. And all of this will come from a tired hand that once thought it had nothing left to give. This is how the loom breathes, quietly, endlessly, through those who never know they are helping it stay alive. Below the loom, in a place where shadow curls like smoke, something stirs. The threads there are older, thicker, rougher, humming with a darker tone. They are the forgotten choices, the regrets, the moments abandoned too soon. The weaver's hand trembles slightly, for even these must be kept. They are the counterweight to grace. Without them, the pattern would tear itself apart. But one of these dark threads quivers more than the rest. It hums with dissonance, its tone restless, hungry. The weaver leans close. It belongs to a man, a king whose name was once sung and now is buried beneath his own legend. He built a throne of light and a crown of promises. But he forgot that light, when untended, blinds as easily as it guides. His cities prospered, his armies conquered, but his heart turned to dust. Now his thread thrashes, seeking release. The weaver hums, low and steady. Peace, comes the sound, though no word is spoken. The thread shivers, resisting. I was meant for greatness, it seems to say. I was meant to endure. And you did, replies the weaver. But endurance without reflection is merely stone. The thread quiets, ashamed, then begins to soften. The weaver smooths it gently, drawing it back into the pattern. Even failure has its rhythm. Even regret can be tuned. The loom hums brighter now. The balance returns. In that moment, a whisper drifts through the mists, a whisper older than time itself. It is the song of the three sisters, the ancient fates who once stood beside the weaver before they chose to forget their own names. They were called Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, the spinner, the measurer, the cutter. They shaped beginnings and endings, their fingers sharp and sure. But when the world learned to name its own destiny, they laid down their scissors and vanished into story. Still, their song remains, woven deep in the weaver's own heartbeat. Threads cross, threads part. The song murmurs. None belong alone. The weaver listens, eyes half closed. A strange ache rises, not sorrow, but kinship. For even the weaver of time can feel the pull of connection, the longing to share the burden of eternity. Then, through the endless fabric, something new appears, a color unseen before. It ripples through the loom like dawn spilling over a forgotten sea. The weaver's fingers freeze. "What are you?" the weaver whispers, astonished. It is a thread of change, wild, untamed, shimmering with potential. It hums in no key the weaver knows. It sings of rebellion, of dreams that refuse their pattern, of love that breaks its own logic. The weaver senses danger and beauty and necessity. This thread was not summoned. It appeared on its own. The weaver touches it carefully, expecting resistance. But the thread purrs like something alive. It knows the rhythm already. It has simply been waiting to join. The weaver smiles, the kind of smile that only eternity can teach. "Very well," says the weaver. "Let us see what song you bring." As the new thread is drawn through the loom, the entire fabric shivers. Stars blink in confusion. Rivers forget their banks. Somewhere, a poet wakes in the middle of the night, gasping with a line that will not let him sleep. Somewhere else, two souls who have never met dream of each other and wake with tears. The pattern shifts, deepens, grows more intricate, and for the first time in 1,000 ages, the weaver feels surprise. The loom hums louder, joyful and uncertain. Perhaps even time can learn. Outside the silent room, dawn gathers its colors. The first light touches the horizon, hesitant, curious, alive. And the weaver whispers to no one at all. So it begins again. There are sounds that cannot be heard, only felt. The hum of stars turning in their sleep. The sigh of roots growing through stone. The whisper of dreams leaving one mind to visit another. These are the echoes of the loom, the music of what holds everything together. The weaver listens to that echo now, letting it fill the silent room. Each vibration tells a story, not of moments, but of meanings. The loom hums, and the weaver closes their eyes. What was once merely a pattern has become a pulse. Outside the veil of the loom, the world begins to shift again. In a quiet village by a river, a mother sits awake through the last hours of night. Her child has been ill for many days. The healer has done all they can. She watches the rise and fall of her child's breath, afraid of each stillness between. She whispers a prayer not to any god she knows, but to the space between breaths, to the hum she feels inside her ribs. And in that moment the weaver feels it too. The thread that holds the child's life flickers, faint but unbroken. The weaver hums in answer, steadying the rhythm, weaving patience around fear. The child sighs and turns. The mother weeps quietly, though she will never know who heard her. Far away, in the dream of a mountain, the first snow falls. Each flake is a thought, brief, pure, and gone. The weaver runs a hand through them, feeling the cool ache of impermanence. All things pass, murmurs the weaver, but nothing is lost. The loom answers with light. Its patterns have grown more complex since the arrival of the new thread, the wild one that appeared unbidden. It dances through the older lines like wind through tall grass, refusing the old rhythm, inviting new shapes. The weaver watches it curiously. It is neither bright nor dark, but both. It turns where the pattern expects it to stay. It leaps where stillness would suffice. It hums a tune the weaver almost remembers. "What are you teaching me?" the weaver asks aloud. The thread shimmers in reply. For a moment the weaver sees through its light, not into the past or the future, but into something older than both, the intention beneath existence. The weaver gasps, the loom trembles, and suddenly the weaver is not alone. A shape emerges from the mist, tall, cloaked in shadow, eyes like cracked mirrors. Its voice is low, like thunder spoken backward. "You meddle too deeply." The weaver does not look away. "You are late," they say softly. "The loom has already changed." "I warned you of balance," the shadow hisses. "You weave too much kindness. You forget the cost." The weaver rises, the air trembling with each word. Kindness is not imbalance. It is courage. The shadow spreads like ink, coiling around the loom. And what is courage but defiance of the pattern? The threads shiver. The wild one gleams brighter, defying the darkness that tries to swallow it. The weaver places a hand upon the loom, whispering an older word, one not heard since the first dawn cracked open. The shadow recoils, hissing. "You cannot silence me," it growls. "I will not try," says the weaver. "You are part of the song." But even the shadow must listen to rhythm. The darkness quivers, uncertain. Slowly, it folds into itself and sinks beneath the threads, becoming again what it has always been. Contrast, not corruption. The room quiets. The weaver's shoulders tremble, not with fear but with the weight of remembering. Even creation must carry its own night. They sit again, hands upon the loom. The hum steadies, though it is slower now, gentler. Between the threads, light pools like honey. It drips through the air, leaving faint trails of gold that hum in harmony. The weaver breathes deeply. Below, in the mortal world, a man stands on a bridge at dawn. He holds a letter he never meant to write, reading words he did not think he could say. Behind him, the river moves without hurry. Above him, the clouds begin to open. He does not know why, but he feels forgiven. The weaver smiles. Every small act of courage echoes through the threads. The loom hums brighter, warming the air. The wild thread dances again. Content. Hours pass, or perhaps centuries. The weaver no longer measures them. Then a tremor. It begins softly, like a heartbeat skipping once, then twice. The weaver's eyes narrow. The loom is shaking, its light flickering. One thread has gone silent, a thread belonging to a world. The weaver leans closer and gasps. A realm beyond the mortal has begun to unravel. A world of dreams, the one where forgotten thoughts go to rest, is collapsing into silence. The threads are brittle, snapping like frostbitten branches. The weaver feels sorrow, sharp and sudden. Too soon, they whisper. Not yet. The wild thread flares, brilliant and defiant. It slips from the weaver's grasp and dives into the breaking pattern, like a spark leaping into darkness. The weaver calls out, but it is already gone. For the first time in eternity, the loom is incomplete. The hum fades to a whisper. The weaver sits motionless, hands trembling above the threads. So this is loss, they murmur. Even the loom must learn. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of ache, of beauty, of something the weaver has never felt before. Faith. Faith that even the missing thread is not truly lost, only traveling somewhere the loom cannot yet reach. Outside the windowless room, the sky blushes with dawn. The weaver stands slowly, brushing a hand across the pattern. The fabric glows faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat still learning its new rhythm. Go then, says the weaver softly. Find what I cannot see. And somewhere beyond the veil of the loom, in a world of sleeping suns and unborn songs, the wild thread drifts, weaving its own beginning. When a thread leaves the loom, the room remembers, not as absence, but as a shape of light where something used to rest. A warmth still lingering in the chair after someone stands. The wild thread had gone. Not cut, not severed, but chosen. It slipped past the shuttle and vanished into the hush between beats, seeking a path the weaver could not name. The loom held its breath. So did the weaver. Silence arrived like snowfall, each flake a thought without a voice. The weaver stood very still and listened to the place where the hum had thinned. Loss changed the air. It made edges sharper, colors truer, and it asked for gentleness. Go then, the weaver had said, and so it went. Beyond the room with no windows, there is a sea that does not wet the skin. Its waves are made of moments. Old lullabies ride its swells. Forgotten promises break upon its shoals, turning into foam that smells faintly of rain. Across the sea drift the worlds that are not quite. Dream countries that borrow our faces to try on their own names. It was here the lost thread woke to itself. It glowed with a life that was not borrowed. It did not remember being chosen, because it had not been. It remembered only the loom's warmth, and the weaver's hands that felt like patience. What am I? It asked the sea. Possibility, said the waves, turning over in their sleep. And hunger. The thread drifted toward an archipelago of sleeping suns. Islands of amber light rose and set without moving. On one such island stood a gate made from the ribs of a giant question. No lock, no handle, only an inscription, carved in a language that looked like wind on tall grass. You may enter by becoming what you ask. The thread trembled. It had no mouth, but it learned to breathe. It had no feet, but it learned to stand. It shaped itself into a figure. The world might understand. Not entirely human, not entirely flame. A filament in the likeness of a traveler. And so the gate opened, not outward or inward, but into more. It stepped into the city of forgotten gods. The city was quiet, not because no one spoke, but because every sound remembered it had once been prayer. Statues leaned against the sky, their faces half rubbed away by centuries of weather and neglect. Names lingered like smoke after a lamp is blown out. Here walked the remnants of belief, a storm deity who had learned to weep, a hearth spirit who had finally gone outdoors, a river god made of maps. They nodded to the thread traveler, for they recognized the light of beginning. New one, rasped the storm deity, his thunderous hair braided with cobweb. What do you seek? The thread considered. A way back. Back is only a word dusk uses to comfort dawn, said the storm. Still there are roads. He pointed a finger that looked like rain. Find the library that remembers what books try to say. Ask for the unspun. The thread bowed, and the bow became a street. It walked along syllables of stone. Lamps bloomed as it passed, each one catching a bit of filament in its glass. Soon a building rose before it, not built so much as grown, a cathedral of shelves whose branches bore fruits of paper and breath. The librarian sat at the threshold, knitting silence with a bone needle. I have come for the unspun, said the thread. The librarian's eyes were the color of pages that have known the sun. Everyone comes for that, they smiled. Few mean it. I mean it, said the thread, and it flickered with something like resolve. Very well. The librarian pulled a drawer from the air. Inside lay a single spool that contained nothing and weighed everything. This is the unspun. It is not a thread. It is the room before thread. Carry it carefully. If you drop it, you will make a future by accident. The thread reached out. The unspun was cold and warm at once, like the skin of water just before it breaks. The filament bowed again. Thank you. Do not thank me, said the librarian, already knitting a new hush. Thank your courage. It knows the way better than maps. Back in the street, the city had shifted. Alleys now bent like questions. Doorways breathed. The thread felt the tug, the same gravity that had drawn it from the loom. It followed the pull-through. A marketplace where merchants sold moments polished bright. A first word, a last laugh, a sunrise that had gotten the colors right. It did not stop. It passed beneath an aqueduct that carried memory, from fountain to fountain, then climbed a stair of sleep. At the top, night stood waiting, wearing a veil. Not darkness, night, the kind that remembers stars under daylight's noise. You carry the unspun, the night said, not asking. I must return, replied the thread. The loom is thinner without me. Night inclined its head, as if listening to a far room. Yes, it is learning hunger. Will you help me? I am already helping you, Night said gently. I am not blocking your path. The thread almost smiled. Then where? Night turned slightly, and a path unhid itself, a causeway made of promises that had not yet found mouths. It led toward a horizon made of quiet. Walk until you hear nothing, said Night. When you begin to fear silence, you will be close. The thread walked, Silence in the upper realms is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of listening. The path narrowed to a wire. Wind forgot to move. The filament felt the tug of unmaking, not malice but the invitation to rest. Pressed on. The unspun a small gravity cupped in its light. Soon it reached a plane of mirrors that reflected only what might be. Each pane showed a version of the thread returning to the loom, then becoming the shuttle, then the hand, then the song itself. Every image asked, "Will you become what is needed?" Over and over the filament answered, "Yes." At the plane's far edge stood a door woven from sighs held back. Could not be opened by force, could only be softened. The thread thought of the weaver's patience, thought of how the loom slowed to listen when grief entered the room. It thought of the mother who prayed to the space between breaths, and of the letter read on the bridge at dawn. The door melted. The path continued. A river crossed the way, its water clear as future regret. The ferryman wore no face. "Price," he said, palm out. "I have no coin." "Everyone has coin," the ferryman replied. "Your price is the shape you are." The thread hesitated. It had learned to be a traveler in order to walk. It had learned to be a voice in order to ask. It had learned to carry. The unspun in order to return. To pay, it must become only what it had been. A line of intention, bright and bare. The filament breathed once and released its borrowed form. It became again a single living line. The ferryman nodded, placing the unspun gently back into the thread's curve. "Go," he said, and the river parted like doubt. Beyond the river the air smelled like beginnings. Here the world had the texture of first snowfall on stone. The thread could feel the loom again, faintly, like a heartbeat through a wall. It hurried, if a thread can be said to hurry, and came upon the last keeper, a child drawing circles in dust. The child looked up, squinting at the light. "You're late," they said. "For what?" "For the lesson." "What is the lesson?" asked the thread. The child smiled with missing teeth. "That you can go home different and still be yourself." They stood and clapped once. The clap became a road. "Take this," said the child, handing the thread a word small enough to carry. It looked like a seed, and it sounded like mercy. "If you plant it when you arrive," the child added, "the loom will learn your name without holding you too tightly." "How do you know?" "I was a thread once," said the child, as if it were ordinary. "I left and returned and learned to be a knot that doesn't choke." The thread bowed for the last time, tucking the seedword beside the unspun. It stepped onto the road made of clapped hands and began to fall upward, a kind of flying only patience can teach. In the room with no windows, the weaver lifted their head. A new breeze touched the loom, the smell of snow and marketplaces, of questions that had found their shape, of ferries that asked fair prices, of gates that open when you become what you ask. Tears brightened the weaver's eyes, and the loom answered with joy, this hum returning like a remembered song. The thread slipped back into the pattern, not where it had been, but where it needed to be now, beside the brittle lines of a dream realm that had begun to collapse, carried the unspun like rain, seeding possibility through the breaking. Cracks became lattices. Silence became listening again. The lost world sighed and took a breath. The weaver laid a gentle palm on the cloth. "Welcome home," they whispered. "Teach me what you learned." The thread warmed. From within it, the seed word sprouted. Not a vine, not a flower, a stitch, a way to join what would otherwise pull apart. The weaver watched in wonder as the new stitch moved through the cloth, small and strong, repairing without erasing, blessing without binding. "This is the mercy stitch," said the weaver, astonished. "It mends and makes room." The loom purred, pleased. Beyond the room, 1,000 small things happened at once. A hand that would have struck paused. A mouth that would have lied remembered the taste of truth. A tired heart kept one more promise. No trumpets, no thunder, just the quiet bravery of ordinary days. That did not break. The pattern deepened. The weaver sat back, exhausted and filled. Loss had taught the loom to listen more tenderly. Returning had taught it to trust what leaves. And the mercy stitch stitched on, whispering a promise the whole fabric could feel. You can change without disappearing. You can keep what matters and let the rest unlearn you. Outside, dawn unlatched itself from night. In kitchens and fields and doorways and trains, people breathed easier for reasons they could not name. Some would call it luck. Some would call it grace. The weaver called it learning. The room was still again, but not quiet. It thrummed with a new rhythm, like a heart that had discovered another way to beat. The loom had learned a new sound, the soft click of the mercy stitch settling into place. It was not loud, not dazzling, not triumphant. It sounded like a held breath released, like the quiet yes that follows a long winter of no. The weaver sat with it, palms open, letting the room tune itself to this hum. Memory gathered in corners like friendly dusk. The loom remembered. It remembered the first dawn. How light did not burst but seeped. How darkness did not flee but stepped aside, giving space the way an elder gives a seat. It remembered the first river, how a line chose motion over perfection, and in choosing invented the curve. It remembered the first grief, how the world did not shatter, only learned the shape of echo. And now it remembered the thread that left and returned bearing a word that behaved like rain. Everything was wetter with meaning. Roots took hold where sand had only known wind. "Stay," whispered the weaver to the pattern, though nothing was trying to leave. "Rest," they whispered to the threads, though none were tired. Below the windowless room, the ordinary world moved in its millions of small ways. A baker rose before dawn and decided not to measure his forgiveness by the spoon. A nurse tucked a blanket a second time around a stranger's shoulders. A mason paused, then aligned a corner with care no one would ever see. None of them were saints. They were simply listening to a hum they could not name, and the day thanked them for it by being a little easier to carry. The loom remembered a different sound, the rasp of the shadow's voice, the needled warning about balance paid with blood. The weaver did not forget that voice. They kept it like flint, in a pocket where the mercy stitch could see it. Sparks are useful. The cloth is honest when opposed by a whetstone. On the cloth of time, new patterns began to surface. Not replacements, but reconciliations. Bright and dark crossed without wrestling. The mercy stitch slipped between them, not to bind, but to let them test each other and remain. Color appeared, that no word could claim, tasted like water after running. Even the shadow, watching from underthread country, eased its curl. "Now listen," said the weaver, and reached with a hand that had learned gentleness. From loss, the loom deepened its hum until hearing became feeling. The room filled with a resonance like a bell struck in the low part of the heart. The echo brought visitors. They came as weather rather than as people. A breeze of question, a drizzle of doubt, a sun of courage that warmed without blinding. And finally, footsteps, not walking but arriving. 3 shapes stood where form remembers myth. They were not young or old. They were not clothed or bare. They were function. They were the sisters who had learned to forget their names. They did not speak as 3. They spoke as a chord. "We were threads once," sang the chord. "Then hands, then habit. We measured because someone must. We cut because not cutting is another kind of cruelty. We left because the world needed to learn how to hear itself." The weaver bowed, not low but true. "You have not been absent," they said. "I have heard you in the tension of beginnings and in the relief of endings." The chord shimmered into 3 notes. One stepped close, the first note, whose smile was the sound of a spindle starting. "You have woven mercy," she said. "Mercy phrase when it is asked to do all the work alone. Teach it companions." "What companions?" asked the weaver. "Clarity," said the second, "the note that measures by touch, not ruler." "Consequences that do not humiliate," said the third, whose scissors glinted. "Like a small moon. Necessary, not cruel." The weaver listened. "Show me their threads." They did not show. They were shown. The loom revealed them the way a lake reveals clouds by stillness. First came clarity, a thread transparent as breath on glass, cutting nothing, hiding nothing, aligning edges until they recognized each other. Then came consequence without humiliation. Sturdy, matte, with a softness at the edge, like leather taught to be kind. The mercy stitch tested both and purred. "Teach me the knot that tells the truth without tightening," said the weaver. The sisters smiled as a single sky. "You will name it yourself." The loom remembered a winter city and offered it as classroom. Snow was falling with the patience of saints. A judge, awake before light, sat with a stack of files and an ache that had been mistaken for duty. Across town, a boy awakened to steel in his mouth, the taste of fear that speaks. In actions it will later not understand. Between them stretched streets, stitched from old decisions. The weaver guided clarity across those seams, then added the mercy stitch where consequences would land. The boy did not avoid the consequence, but the shape of it bent, away from humiliation toward repair. A window that would have shattered, learned instead how to open. The judge put down the pen as if it were a weapon, then picked it up as if it were a hand. The loom remembered another place, a house on a coastline where storms practice. A woman stored her mother's teacups in a box and could not close the lid. Clarity thread sat beside her, saying nothing, refusing to lie. The mercy stitch made room for tears. Consequence without humiliation, waited by the door to walk her to the sea, where waves translate sorrow into rhythm. She returned with empty hands and a heart that had one more place to sit down. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was broken. The pattern accepted both. In the quiet room, the weaver leaned closer to the cloth. A distortion shimmered, a flare where threads had burned together under the heat of panic. The weaver frowned. Here, they murmured, an age that loved certainties, until they forgot how to be kind. The cloth is brittle. Add slack, said the first note gently. Teach patience to the tight places, said the second. Release what cannot hold, said the third, and the scissors glinted careful. The weaver breathed and widened the weave just a fraction, just enough. The pattern sighed. New air moved between the threads. The brittle parts remembered they were also fabric. Tension eased. The way a held jaw learns how to be a face again. The room brightened. The wild thread, the one that had left and returned, flashed, delighted, and braided itself briefly with clarity. Where they crossed, a gate appeared on the fabric, a threshold that did not lead away but further in. Through that gate the weaver could see a future not as map but as promise. Children learning how to repair before they learn how to perform. Elders whose stories are kept in use rather than in boxes. Cities that plan for shade as if shade were wisdom. Courts that ask better questions. Hospitals that measure recovery in laughter as well as charts. Kitchens where the smallest plate is placed first. It is only one of the futures, said the measuring note. Patterns do not command. They invite. Invitation is enough, the weaver whispered. But even invitations can meet interruption. The shadow stirred, not in rage, but in restlessness, the way a muscle complains when finally asked to share its work. It rose to the surface, making the threads go dim. Where's the cost? The shadow asked, voice less thunder, more rain. Where is the cut that honors boundaries? The weaver lifted the scissors with reverence. Here, they said, and they cut, cleanly, sparingly, the strands that had become strangling ropes, false certainties, inherited cruelties, economies that mistook speed for worth. Each cut was followed by the mercy stitch, then by clarity, then by the soft edge. Of consequence without humiliation. The cloth did not thin. It breathed. The shadow softened, surprised to find itself relieved. Balance, it murmured, and returned below like a tide that knows its moon. The loom remembered something older than even the first dawn, the hush that came before it, when all possibilities sat like seeds in unwatered ground. The weaver closed their eyes, letting that hush dust their fingers. There is another stitch, they said slowly, one I cannot see yet. Listen under listening, the first note whispered. Wait until waiting stops trying to be a strategy, said the second. Let something end, said the third, tender as a last hand held well. So the weaver waited, not as technique but as surrender. Hours or eras, who could say, bled without bruise. In a city tuned to static, a radio lost its station and found a choir. In a hospital corridor, a janitor hummed a lullaby his grandmother taught him. And 3 rooms forgot their fear for 1 minute. In a high school, a teacher changed the seating chart and 2 people met who would one day remind an entire town how to share rain. None of this made news. All of this made sense. Then there, a feeling like a tide turning under skin. The new stitch arrived. The way robins decide a winter has lasted long enough. It did not bind. It beckoned. It connected edges without touching them, inviting them to lean toward each other. until proximity did what force could never accomplish. "What are you?" the weaver asked, already smiling. It answered by working, crossing a neighborhood line once used as a scar, and turning it into an avenue where food and stories passed both ways, winding through a family where silence had become a shrine, and teaching voices to walk without shouting, drifting through a parliament until opponents remembered how to be adversaries instead of enemies. Edges remained edges, but fear lost its appointment. "I will call you the welcome stitch," said the weaver. "You do not erase difference. You make meeting possible." The loom rang with quiet joy. The sisters nodded in approval, then pulled back into their cord, then into weather, then into the memory of necessary tools. The weaver returned to the cloth with hands that had learned their own patience. Mercy, clarity, consequence without humiliation, and the welcome stitch began to move together, not as policy, not as decree, but as habit, the secret architecture of days that want to hold. Below, the ordinary world answered like a field after rain. A father admitted aloud that he did not know, and the room did not punish him for it. A protest learned a song that made even the police unclench their jaws. A widow planted cuttings from a plant her wife had kept alive through 3 apartments. Every new leaf was a letter that spelled, "Continue." In a courtroom, a victim and an offender spoke in a circle until the word, "we," was big enough to carry both harm and hope without breaking. The loom remembered all of it, kept every small courage, the way a pocket keeps a marble. Warm now, friendly, ready for a hand. "Are we finished?" the weaver asked, already knowing the answer. The loom hummed laughter, which sounds like wind through prayer flags. "Finished is a story endings tell themselves to feel important," the hum replied. "Learning is the true religion of fabric." The weaver smiled, relief and responsibility braided in their face. They laid their cheek briefly against the cloth of time. It was warm. It smelled like steam from a kettle and the first page of a book and the skin of someone safe. "Then let us keep remembering," they whispered. "Let us hold what holds us." The wild thread thrummed in agreement, its glow now less lightning, more hearth. The shadow kept its honorable watch in the underthreads. The mercy stitch ticked steadily. Clarity shone without cruelty. Consequences arrived with hands open. The welcome stitch invited edges to breathe. Outside the room, night lifted its veil so morning could dress. Children practiced mending in school without being taught the word for it. Elders told stories that were not monuments but bridges. Someone brewed enough tea for one more person than expected. Someone set an extra plate. Somewhere, a door remembered how to be a door and not a wall. The loom remembered, and in remembering, it taught. There comes a morning when even the eternal must pause to listen to what it has made. The loom rested, not from exhaustion, but from fullness. Its threads shimmered softly in the dim light that was neither day nor night. The air itself seemed to breathe with it, in and out, slow and even, like a chest that had finally remembered calm. The weaver sat before it, hands folded. For the first time in a span without number, they did not reach for the shuttle. They simply looked. The fabric of time stretched before them, vast and alive. Patterns glowed faintly like constellations hidden under water. Every ripple told a story, every thread a life, every knot a lesson learned slowly and well. The mercy stitch gleamed faintly where sorrow had once lived. The clarity thread moved beside it, transparent and patient. Consequences without humiliation wove in long, steady lines that did not bite. And between them all ran the welcome stitch, the newest, gentlest rhythm of all. The loom hummed softly, as if dreaming. "Are you content?" asked a voice, though there was no one else in the room. The weaver tilted their head. "Content is too small a word," they said. "But yes, the cloth remembers now. It no longer needs me to speak for it." The hum deepened, pleased. "Then you have done what few ever dare." "I only listened," said the weaver. The pattern taught itself. Outside, the veil between worlds shimmered. It was dawn somewhere, perhaps everywhere, and every ray of light that broke across a window or a sea or a face carried a small tremor of that hum. The world did not know it, but it was remembering how to be gentle. The weaver rose, their robes whispering like water. "Is it time?" The loom's light pulsed once, slow and sure. "Time is a circle, not a command." They smiled. "Then let me walk it." And so the weaver stepped into the cloth. Not onto it, not above it, into it. The threads opened, welcoming. Each line of light brushed against them like a heartbeat recognizing its twin. They walked through stories they had once shaped, touching them as lightly as a wind passing through leaves. The baker who forgave without reason. The mother who prayed to silence and was heard. The king who learned the difference between power and peace. Their lives shimmered like fireflies in the weave. The weaver felt no pride, only kinship. They were all weavers, each in their own way. As they moved deeper, the air grew warmer. Threads thickened into rivers. Colors merged into new shades. The pattern no longer obeyed symmetry. It had become wild, alive, improvising its own beauty. Laughter threaded through lament, memory through prophecy. The loom was now an organism, dreaming itself forward. At the center of it all lay a stillness, the heart of the fabric, where no thread began or ended. The weaver knelt there, resting their palms on the glow. It was warm, steady, pulsing like the heartbeat of everything that has ever loved. "Do you hear me?" the weaver whispered. "Yes," said the voice, but it was not the loom's voice anymore. It was the voice of the cloth itself, the echo of a billion small kindnesses, the sound of uncountable acts of care. It spoke in the language of continuation. "We remember." The weaver closed their eyes. "Then my work is done." "No," said the cloth. "It is transformed." Light rose through the threads, soft as dawn fog. It wrapped around the weaver like gratitude. "You will not leave," it murmured. "You will become the rhythm that remains when silence has learned to sing." The weaver's breath slowed. "To be the rhythm." "Yes," said the cloth. "Not the hand that weaves, but the pause between motions." The weaver bowed, not in sorrow, but in completion. Their body began to fade, becoming filament, then light, then the hum itself. The loom trembled once, acknowledging the joining. The weaver's essence flowed into the weave, not as a master, but as a melody. And the loom spoke softly, to no one and to all. "This is how endings teach beginnings." Far below, in the waking world, morning spilled across 1,000 small miracles. A child awoke from a dream they could not explain, heart calm, as if held by something vast. A woman standing at a bus stop lifted her face to the sky for no reason and smiled. Two strangers in an empty train car met eyes and did not look away. A teacher paused mid-sentence and decided to say less, to listen more. An old man planting seeds whispered, "Again," and the soil answered. They did not know that the hum beneath their ribs was the same hum that once filled a room with no windows. They only knew the day felt kind. In the space that used to be the loom, there was now only light, soft, breathing, unhurried. It did not weave any more. It invited. Threads came of their own accord, humming their own patterns, adding to the great cloth. No one commanded them. They were drawn by resonance, by the memory of being seen. From that light came a new weaver. They were smaller, quieter, but their eyes were bright. Their hands trembled not with fear, but reverence. Before them stretched an unfinished expanse of possibility. Threads waiting, stories resting, silences ready to listen. The new weaver did not speak. They reached out and touched the fabric. A sound filled the room. The same hum, eternal and ever new. The mercy stitch stirred. The clarity thread glowed. The welcome stitch shimmered, as if recognizing a friend. The weaver smiled. "You remember," they whispered. The loom did not answer with words, only with light, brighter now, patient and endless. The new weaver began to work. If you listen very closely, you can still hear it. In the hush before sunrise, in the sigh that follows forgiveness, in the sound of thread pulling gently through fabric. It is the song of the loom of time of us, and it whispers softly as breath. All things continue. End of the weaver of time. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. May your dreams be kind, your choices gentle, and your thread woven with grace.